The reason I'm here is we're going to be looking at ransomware groups. So we're looking at, hang on, sorry. Ransomware groups, new techniques, targets, and trends. So without further ado, I'll get going. So before we get into how ransomware developments have developed over into current times, I think it's important to look at how it all started. Now, ransomware started back in 1989, which was for the World Health Organization, the International AIDS Conference. So this was a biologist named Joseph Popp who used the baiting technique, where he left floppy disks containing malicious code at the conference for people with curious minds to pick up, put into their systems, and then it would execute, and then the ransomware encrypted their data. So this is the very first instance of ransomware. And this is a single extortion impact event, and I'll go through the extortions later and how it has developed since then. But the precedence was set back in 1989, and since then it has only increased and developed. But this marked the start of ransomware. So bringing it forward to current times, looking at the 2021, 2022, and 2023 periods. Ransomware has been at a very high level since the start of it. Now, I'd like to stress that this is reported averages, so not all ransomware attacks. In fact, the majority of ransomware attacks go unreported, and are dealt with one-on-one with the threat actor and the victim. But for reported threats, this is what we can go off. Back in 2021, the monthly average for ransomware attacks sat at 294. That was fairly high. That is the highest we've seen it as of 2021. That was the highest it's been. In 2022, there's a bit of a drop, so that went down to 209 a month of monthly average. Now, looking into this, it is assessed that this is due to targeting big game hunting, it's called. So this is where threat actors, instead of doing wide campaign attacks, they go on to targeting larger organizations for larger sums of money. However, as we'll find out later, this was rather unsuccessful, and so the tactics have changed up for 2023. Which is reflected in the monthly average being 350 so far. So what has changed is a big spike of that being clock targeting, which you may remember movement vulnerability back in June and July, which a great spike in malware activity. And this is a scattered approach, but we'll cover this in a moment. So on to targeting areas. So this is a global issue. However, it's far more likely for Western-based companies to be targeted. So these are reported numbers again. So the United States with 40% of all reported targets. Second is Canada, and third is here in the United Kingdom. So it's very much an issue that is targeted over towards the Western side. For sector targeting of trends, this covers a time period between April 22 to April 23. And as you can see here, these are reports again. And manufacturing is by far the leading in ransomware targeting, affecting 339 reported cases of ransomware over this time period, with finance and transport being behind, with education and healthcare there as well. So we've covered the targeting areas. However, over the past 6 months, myself and the threat intelligence team here at Quorum Cyber, we've been looking at ransomware gang activity and seeing the most active and the surging threats that are currently out there. And we've narrowed it down to 5. So First of all, CLOP had a massive spike in activity end of May, June, and July. This was the MOVEit vulnerability exploitation. Now, what they did here was come away from the big game hunting that we saw last year and instead go for smaller ransomware demands, but mass targeting, focusing on vulnerability exploitation of the MOVEit. Next, we've got Alpha and Black Cat. This is a ransomware as a service. So this means that it is a ransomware group that licenses out their ransomware capabilities, their ransomware software, to other threat actors, those who do not have their own indigenous or organic capabilities to hand. This is a ransomware as a service. They utilize Rust programming language, which allows faster encryption speeds, and they have been active since December of 2022. So Alpha targets primarily manufacturing, finance, and law firms. Down to Black Bastard, again, ransomware as a service. This is believed to be a successor to Conti. Now, Conti was a very notorious ransomware gang which targeted the Costa Rican government back in 2021, and Conti was disbanded early last year. However, Black Bastard has a lot of the behaviours that Conti had, so it's assessed that Black Bastard is a renaming or a reforging of Conti. Now, these use CACBot or QBot for initial access. They're to victims, and they're primarily against housing and crypto organizations. 8base was fairly quiet over last year and the start of this year. However, in May of 2023, there was quite a surge in activity for this group. And at the surface level, this threat actor holds many significant similarities with the Hive ransomware group. Again, Hive was a group that was disbanded last year. However, based on similarities and behaviours, it's assessed that 8base is likely just a rebranding of the Hive ransomware gang. And 8base primarily targeting housing, healthcare, finance, and manufacturing. And next, Lockbit. So Lockbit is a very notorious one. It has been at the most active ransomware as a service organization for quite some time now. I believe they were the highest since about October of last year. However, as they are, well, since they are the number one most active, however, they are not without their issues, and it's been recently reported back in middle of August that they're having storage restrictions and bandwidth issues for uploading malware, but also the distribution of stolen information. So we'll be monitoring that and reporting that as it goes forward. Lockbit have they are global targeting. However, they are most likely to target business services, healthcare, government, and construction firms. All 5 of these, CLOP, Alpha, Black Bastard, 8base, and Lockbit, we have pre-made malware reports for all 5 of these on our website, which are free and available to all of you. And we will talk more about that at the end of this webinar. So next, I'll talk about the ransomware extortion tactics. So as you may remember, at the start of this webinar, I mentioned the very first ransomware attack, which was against the WHO organization. Now, this was very basic. This was a single extortion attack. So what that means is it's data encryption only, and then it is between the victim and the threat actor to how much money it requires to get your information back. Now, this is mostly obsolete. We don't really see this too much these days. What we are seeing, which is very common now, is double extortion. So double extortion is the data encryption, but also the threat of the publishing of data on dark web sites. So examples of this, you've got CLOP, Black Bastard, 8base, and Lockbit, so the previously mentioned groups from earlier. And this is the theft of data, and then you're given a small time frame to pay it, and then you get information back. Now, all of this, as we go through single, double, triple, and quadruple, this is designed, each step is designed to add more victim pressure and coax the victim into paying the ransom. So next is triple extortion. So this is actually rising in popularity. So we're seeing a few more examples of this. This is Alpha. It's been doing a bit of this, No Escape Ransomware, and Carica. However, it is one to note that this is at threat actor discretion. So with the ransomware as a service model, the license of ransomware is given out to a third party, and it's up to that third party whether or not they want to go down the triple extortion route. Now, what triple extortion is same as double extortion with the data encryption and publishing of data. However, added onto this, the threat actor will get this information, reach out to the partners and customers of the victim and message them and let them know that ransomware has occurred. The data has been exfiltrated and will be released unless the host organization pays up. So it adds that additional layer of pressure, targeting the victims, the partners and customers of the victim as well. And now, beyond that, there starts to be a couple of examples now of quadruple extortion. Now, this is rare, however, potential to rise. And what this is the same as the first. It's triple extortion, however, with the addition of denial as a service attack. So each one of those is incrementally increasing victim pressure to leverage payment of ransom. So at the moment, we are most seeing double extortion. However, triple extortion is rising in popularity rather fast, and quadruple extortion is also rising. That's not to say as well that advances can't go beyond this as well. In fact, it's almost certain that given enough time, we'll see quintuple extortion and further as well. So I'll talk now about trading methods of initial ingress. So for a very long time, phishing campaigns have been the #1 most active area of initial ingress for ransomware attacks. However, in 2023, this has shifted down into second place. It's not to say that phishing campaigns are not active, as much active as they have been in the past. It's just to say that critical vulnerability exploitation has had a big surge in the past 6 months. So critical vulnerability exploitation has actually taken the lead in this, and now phishing campaigns is down in second place, and leverage of leaked credentials is in third, and we'll cover these now. So myself and the threat intelligence team, over the course of 2023, we've been monitoring ransomware attacks, and we've been monitoring the exploited vulnerabilities and which are the most exploited and why. And from what we've seen, these 5 here, the MOVEit, Barracuda, Email Security Gateway, Papercut, Microsoft Outlook, and Virtual Machineware ESXi Hypervisor are the top 5 that have been targeted in the 2023. So first, MOVEit. So in late May, MOVEit MOVEit transfer product line, it was highlighted to have a critical vulnerability, and the Clop ransomware gang took full advantage of this, and what it did was Clop used large active scanning. So we had first-hand experience of this and experience of seeing scanning across multiple networks. And they were seeing who was vulnerable to this. And then they could get escalated privileges and exfiltrate large quantities of data. Now, what they did, they didn't actually use, when they did their ransomware, what they didn't do was encryption. So they wanted to get in and get out as fast as possible. So they didn't encrypt, withdrew all your information, and then put it on their dark web site for double extortion. Down to Barracuda, what we saw was this was in late May, and this affected the Barracuda email security gateway appliances. Now, this was threat actors have been utilizing a backdoor. So this vulnerability provided threat actors with a backdoor, which they could do reverse shell capabilities. and then add further ransomware or malware strains into your environment. We saw reports of Chinese threat actors utilizing this and has assessed this was espionage purposes. Next, we've got Papercut. So this was released in mid-April of this year, and this affected both Papercut NG and MF products. This enabled unauthenticated actors to execute malicious code remotely without credentials. And this was actively exploited by the Bloody ransomware group to infiltrate their Bloody ransomware onto your machines. And then again, double extortion there. And this primarily affected the education sector of this year. However, we're currently monitoring it now. Next, there's Microsoft Outlook vulnerability, which occurred mid-March of this year. And it's affected all versions of Microsoft Outlook, from Android OS onto the Windows system itself. And this used leaked credentials from dark web sources, where attackers can then go onto Microsoft Outlook devices and steal NTLM v2 data, and then using it to log in where NTLM data was stored, and then gain access to the account. From there, they've got access to all emails, so they can further do either phishing campaigns more effectively from there as well. And this is assessed to be Russian threat actors and ransomware groups using this actively. And finally, VMware ESXi hypervisor. This vulnerability is actually released in 2020 and 2021 respectively, and it relies on unpatched systems. So this affected VMware ESXi hypervisors prior to version 7, and this allowed for remote execution and subsequent ransomware delivery. And there's a massive surge of this actually in February of this year. So it may have been a vulnerability that was first released back in 2020 and 2021. However, it was February of this year where the big surge of activity came from. And again, this is assessed to be ransomware as a service groups and also Chinese threat actors doing espionage purposes. Now, a few recommendations for these vulnerabilities. Strong vulnerability management is key. So I'm not a salesperson, but here at Quorum Cyber, we do have a very good vulnerability management team who actively look into these and see if you are vulnerable to these and give further recommendations from there. And if you do believe you use these systems and that you are vulnerable to these exploits, it is highly recommended that immediate patching critical systems is conducted. However, this is where achievable. Some systems, it's down to your company really, if you can afford to patch at that time, but it's highly recommended. And additionally as well, we produce threat intelligence bulletins that go onto our website, which keep you up to date with the latest vulnerabilities. So you can keep an eye on that, and they are free as well. They're on our website. So next, so phishing campaigns, as I highlighted earlier, they've been shifted down to second place this year of most active methods of initial ingress. However, that's not to say that they have reduced in potency in any way, shape or form. What we have seen, and this is the past couple of weeks that we've seen firsthand, is a new form of campaign. Now, this isn't targeting emails, this is targeting Microsoft Teams. So what this is as an external threat actor can use either leaked credentials or via social media harvesting to see who is in major positions and then target your organizations by pretending to be that person. So I've created an example here, which is I've created someone called Bill Overbeck who are pretending that they're in HR. So what I've done is created a group to hide the fact that it says I'm external, and then the threat actor hooks the victim with a punchline, a draw-in tag. So what I've done here is highlighted that the company is going through redundancies, and that check out to see if you are being made redundant. So that will be in place, and then attached with that will be a zip file Now, once opened, this zip file will appear to have some PDF files with the data they are after. However, this is actually a link file masquerading as a PDF, so it's not actually a PDF, which contains shortcuts containing executables, which are linked to threat actor-owned websites. Once clicked, these execute commands from threat actor websites, and they are triggered. Then further instructions are received from a threat actor website to your network, which then downloads Darkgate C2. Now, Darkgate C2 is very much like Cobalt Strike or Sliver. It's a post-exploitation tooling. And once Darkgate C2 is installed, threat actors can then have access to your network, can move laterally, can get persistence measures in, elevate privileges, and install further malware, i.e. ransomware. So coming away from traditional email phishing, what this does, it leverages the trust of Microsoft Teams. So many people within organizations won't realize that phishing can come through via Teams, not just email. And this is down to lack of experience on the victim's behalf. So it's recommended that education on this is pushed out throughout organizations. We have bulletins on this, and they are TLP clear, which can be shared throughout your organization for educational purposes. So this is under active exploitation. The example we've got here, the email that is connected to. So usually when you're using Microsoft Teams, the email, if it's an internal, for myself, it will be at Quorum. However, this one here is not linked to myself. So that means that is an external person, and a bit more digging needs to go into before it's trusted. And on Microsoft.com has been attributed to Midnight Blizzard, which is a Russian threat actor, also known as APT29. That is an active exploitation. We have seen it targeting local government, and we assess it is only going to spread. Additionally, organized crime and ransomware gangs are believed to be using this tactic as well going forward. And next, we've got credential theft leverage. So credential theft leverage, this can actually optimize the previous two initial ingress mechanisms discussed, as it gives credentials into account. Now, there are two main methods of obtaining credentials at the current time. Number one is purchasing on dark web marketplaces, and number two is when you are exposed to stillware. Now, most active stillware which is out there at the moment is Redline, Raccoon, Vida, Metastealer, and Luma. I'd like to highlight that reports to all 5 of these are available on our website for free, so please feel free to download a copy and have a look. And how they interact with yourself can be in many different ways. First of all, malvertising. They can be held within malicious adverts online, embedded in malware and cracked software. However, the number one method of ingress that we've seen is search engine optimization poisoning, or SEO poisoning. Now, I've made a bit of an example here. So how this works is poisoning returns malicious links on common search terms. So if you go onto Google and type in whatever it is you want to type in, for example, I've done Firefox, you will see at the top you'll get sponsored results. Now, it's not to say that all sponsored results are malicious, because they're not. However, some sponsored results are being hosted by threat actors, and they like to do this because it's at the very top of the page and people are far more likely to click on it. Now, in this example, I've gone for Firefox, and the one at the top, for this example, that is malicious. So it's highly recommended that when yourself or your staff are using search engines, that sponsored results are not accessed, and that you actually go for the ones further down. Now, the ways to combat this, installing credentials, they can be, so that was how stillware impacts you. However, the other way of doing it, as we mentioned a minute ago, was purchase on dark web marketplaces. Now, single credentials or batches of credentials go for very cheap. We're talking as little as £3. And this is not just username and passwords. Well, it is username and passwords, but there's far more as well. This is also session tokens with cookie data. So this information here, if the user at the time of compromise had the correct session tokens on them, this can be used to bypass multi-factor authentication. So they have your password, they have your username, and they can get through MFA. So it means that exploitation is far more likely and far more effective. And additionally, this allows for effective social engineering. Previously seen with the Teams phishing, if they've got credentials to get in, then it means that the whole external red flag is not there, and they can get much more effective with that. Now, to combat this, dark web and credential monitoring. So organizations, many organizations have what's called dark web and credential monitoring. And again, I'm not a salesman, but we have this. Now this, we crawl these credential marketplaces to see if your organization has been affected. And once it is flagged up and yes, you have been affected and your details are on there, alerts then go out so that you can immediately issue password resets. So these credentials can no longer be used in attacks. So also this is a huge business for threat actors, and credential sales remain popular on dark web sources. Therefore, based on this accessibility and effectiveness and popularity, it's highly likely that stillware activity will not slow over coming years, and in fact, it'll only increase. So now we're going to look at evolution of capabilities in 2023. So first of all, I'd like to highlight the first statistic that I've got at the top there. So in 2022, 91% of ransomware attacks targeted Windows-based systems. So that's not including Linux, that's not including Mac, and that's not including ESXi. This is purely Windows-based systems. Now, what that did was highlight a gap in the market. So all these ransomware as a service operators, yes, they get money from conducting ransomware attacks, but a large part of their revenue comes from the licensing of their ransomware to threat actors. Now, if you're a business and you see that there is a 91% window out there, you're going to want to fill it. So in recent times, there's been a big surge in these ransomware as a service groups, looking at ways to have their ransomware target not just Windows-based systems, but your Linux, your Mac, and your ESXi. So starting back in January, we saw Clop target Linux, but one to highlight is the Lockbit in April. This was the very first time that encryptors for Mac devices were. It's the very first time that a ransomware gang was developing a encryptor purely for Mac OS. So that is now out there. And in the first half of 2023, only 32% of victims paid ransomware, and in since 2022, there has been a 40% drop in ransomware revenue. So now we'll look for the second half of this year and also beyond. So we made a few intelligence assessments here. The first one being that in 2023, we believe it's the year of ransomware. So we saw the targeting at the start of this, and that is only set to increase, and this year will be the highest level of ransomware out there. That is due to the casting of a wider net with higher rates of returns. This is the Clop model. So instead of doing the big game hunting, where threat actors go after the largest people only, and then ask for large demands, where they're far less likely to be paid, as seen up here in this statistic here. The CLOP model is to do wide targeting through vulnerability exploitation. So finding a vulnerability and seeing everyone who is not patched to that, and then sending up ransomware to all, but at a lower level. That is why the 2023 year of the ransomware is likely to happen. Additionally, vulnerability targeting is set to be the top. This is again based on the need for greater returns and high levels of targeting. And also as well, continued ransomware expansion development is likely to continue based on competition between ransomware groups, so that they can fill the gap, that 91% gap we covered earlier. Now, I just threw a lot of information at you, I do understand, but I'm more than happy to answer questions. I would like to highlight as well that on our website we have bulletins which cover the latest vulnerabilities and surging campaign threats. We also have 3 malware reports and 3 threat actor profiles for you to enjoy. If there's any other questions that are sort of raised in the next hour or so, or coming days, the contact details for myself and my team is on screen at the moment. So that's us. So I'm more than happy for you to reach out with another question, and I can get back to you when feasible. So I was about to say, this is actually a series of webinars. So this is the first one. There's another one happening in November, which is a geopolitical webinar about the big 4, that being Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and their impact to the cyber landscape and how they are impacting us. And there's another one happening in January, which is how to best communicate intelligence to all levels of business, from the board down to analysts and engineers. So there's a series of webinars. So I hope to see you there.